Okay, so yesterday,
Yeah, how you doing?
let me get my door closed.
What's the dog gray? It is.
Yesterday we talked about measures of center and spread and measures of centers. I need your attention, please. Measures of center are, well, the most common that we use are mean and median. So mode was also a measure of center, but usually you're going to use the mean or the median. And then measures of spread, most often we either use the standard deviation or we use the 5-number summary, because then you have your max and your min. You can find your range, you can find your interquartile range. So or what you have to decide when you have data, or what statisticians have to decide, is what measures best summarize the data. So based on the data, if your mean and your median are different, which one should you use? And then should you use standard deviation or should you use the 5-number summary to best describe data? And that depends on the distribution. So a distribution of data shows observed or theoretical frequency of each possible data value. And there's two ways we can view the shape of a distribution. We can either view that by graphing a histogram, which is like a bar graph. You just don't have spaces in between the bars. But graphing a histogram and then drawing a curve over it. Or you can view a distribution with a box and whisker plot. We are not making these by hand. That's why we have the graphing calculators, because graphing calculators can make them. So I just want to talk about the distributions quickly and then how that helps you determine what to use for your data. I'm going to start with symmetric. Symmetric distribution is where your mean and your median are approximately the same number, and they are approximately in the middle of your data. Now again, I'm saying approximately. It might not look exactly like this and can still be symmetric. So approximately, so you have your most data in the middle, and then the data on either side is about or approximately evenly distributed. It doesn't mean that in your histogram the bars on either side have to be the same height, but notice again your mean or the bulk of your data is in that middle. Your mean and your median would be approximately equal in the middle. If you do not have a symmetric distribution, you have a skewed distribution. This often happens with outliers. So you can have a negatively skewed or positively skewed. Negatively skewed, this is what it would look like. You have a tail on the left side, or the negative side if you think of it that way. And so your highest point is kind of farther to the right, and you have a tail to the left. What that tail does is it pulls the mean, the average, down with the tail. So it pulls the mean away from the median. The mean is more affected than the median is, so the mean ends up being smaller than the median in that case. Majority of your data is still going to be on the right side. So away from that tail, majority of the data is here. And then it's opposite with positively skewed. So here your tail is to the right, or the positive end, and that tail is pulling your mean in that direction. So your mean ends up being higher than your median. Majority of your data is still lower though, below your mean, still down away from the tail. So how we're tying this into yesterday, if you have a symmetric distribution, the mean and the standard deviation more accurately reflect your center and spread, because with a symmetric distribution, your mean is in the middle. And then since your standard deviation depends on your mean, that would be an accurate reflection of your spread. If your distribution is skewed, your mean is affected by that tail, meaning the mean is not the best measure of the center, the median is. So I'm not going to read through this word for word, but the mean is affected by those outliers or by that tail. The median is less affected. So This, if you want to highlight it, underline it, circle it, but this is how you choose appropriate statistics based on a distribution. If the distribution is relatively symmetric, then your measure of center and spread will be the mean and the standard deviation. If your distribution is skewed or has outliers, then your center measurement, you want to be the median. And then to get your spread, you would describe the 5-number summary. So you'd have your min and your max, so you could find your range. You'd have your quartiles, so you could find your interquartile range. But you would find the 5-number summary and use that to describe your data if it's skewed. That would be more accurate than your mean. And then this is just showing if you have a box and whisker plot, what it looks like if it's symmetric versus negatively or positively skewed. How many of you have made a box and whisker plot, like drawn one out by hand before? Okay, some of you. So a box and whisker plot shows a 5-number summary. If you haven't made one, the two ends are the min and the max. The line that goes through some part, either the center or some part of that box, is the median. And then the other two lines that form the outer edges of the box are your first and third quartiles. That's quartile 1 and quartile 3. So you really have those 5 lines, and that creates your box and whisker plot. It's your 5-number summary. But for a symmetric distribution, the median will be approximately in the center of the box, and then the lines that come out from it are the whiskers. So if they're approximately the same length, it's symmetric. And then if it's skewed, if it's negatively skewed, just like we had a tail to the left up here, your left whisker is longer, and then the median is always pulled away from that. So the median is still closer to the smaller whisker. If it's positively skewed, just like we had a right tail, you would have a right whisker that's longer, and the median would be closer to the left side. So we are going to use the graphing calculators to either make a histogram or box and whisker plot and then get the statistics that we need. So if you go to example 1, make sure you're following along as I go through like what to push on the calculator. I'm not going to repeat myself 5 times because you're not paying attention. And then help each other out too in your groups. So if you're on the right screen and somebody's having trouble, I'll obviously walk around too, but if you can help them get there, that would be great. So we have this data in the table. We have students in Mr. Fiji's language arts class found the average number of minutes that they spent on homework each night. And we have, this is a 4x6 table, so there's 24 values in that table. And part A says to use a graphing calculator to create a histogram and then describe the shape of the distribution. So first of all, make sure your calculators should turn on. They were all used 4th hour, and nobody said theirs, well, one person said theirs didn't work and I changed the battery. So the on button is the lower left, make sure it turns on. And then if you get a message about your batteries being low, just press enter and ignore it. If it dies, give it to me. But they tend to work for a long time after they say the batteries are low. So what we are going to do is I'm going to write down also the keys that we're pushing, and you could write them down too. We're going to be continuing with this tomorrow, so that way as we're going through it again tomorrow, you're kind of familiar with where to go. So you want to hit the stat key first, and that is in the 3rd column, 2nd key down is stat. So you hit that key, and this is the screen you should get. And then we want that first option that's already highlighted, one that says edit, is the one that we want. So I would hit enter on that. And then If you have things filled in, I want you to clear that, especially if you have more than one column filled in. Also, you can't trust the person who used this calculator before you to have filled it in correctly. If you're like, I'm just going to use what somebody else did. I had a number of people fourth hour that didn't get the right thing, so don't just trust what they typed in. So I would just clear this so you can type the values in yourself and know that they're right. How to clear a list, and you might not have the same list names that I do, but how to clear it is you arrow up to the name of the list, and then you have to hit the clear button, which is in the very last column. It's like underneath the down arrow. Hit clear, and then you have to hit enter, which is in the bottom right. And then everything in your list should disappear. And if you have things in more than one list, because I know that happened fourth hour too, make sure all of the lists are cleared. They're all starting out blank. And then I would make note of which list you are going to type things into. So if you don't have an L1, that's fine. Just make sure that you know the name of the list you're typing things into. So I'm going to write down, just because you need it for some other things, I'm just putting L1 so I remember I'm typing it into L1. There is, and one of you must have it because all the yellow calculators are gone. There is a yellow calculator that has an L1, but it comes after like L5 or L6. Anybody have that? Okay, don't use L1. So arrow over and use L2. Because somebody used L1 in fourth hour and then it was not working, but I know first hour somebody used L2 and it was fine. So use L2 for yours. So there might be some things later I have to help you change, but I want to make sure that you can get it to work. Okay, anybody have trouble clearing their list or getting here? Okay, so then what you would do from here is you're typing all of these values into that list. They should all go into the same list. I realize there's 6 different columns here. You are not making 6 different columns on your calculator. These all go into the same column. And how to type them in, you just type the numbers. So I start with 62, and then you hit enter, and it adds it to the list, and then you just keep going. Okay, so enter all 24 numbers into that list. And then once you're done, at the bottom, you should see your list name, and then in parentheses, it should say 25 because it's ready to type in the 25th number. So as long as you see a 25, that means you've already typed in the 24 values that you need. If you see a different number there, you either typed in too many numbers or not enough. Anybody having trouble typing their numbers in for their list? Okay. Are we all good to move on? We're good? Okay, we're good. So now from here, again, this should be set up because fourth hour used these, but again, I wasn't looking at every calculator, so who knows. So from here, what you want to go to is you're going to hit the second key followed by the Y equals key. So second key is first column, it should be either blue or an orangish yellow. And then Y equals, there's 5 keys at the very top. Y equals is the very first one. So you're really going, if you look above Y equals, you're going to that stat plot. So if you hit second Y equals, you should get the stat plots screen.
I think that's what.
Let me know if you don't have that. You won't have the different colors on your screen, but you're not in the right place. If you didn't, yeah, if you didn't press second, this is where you are. Just from there, just hit seconds and then y equals, and it should bring you to the right level. Okay, should say stat plots across the top. You want to then go to plot 1. So just click enter on plot 1. And again, this should already be done, but just make sure plot 1 should be turned on. So right now, my cursor is over on, and off is, there's nothing highlighting off. So if yours looks like this, then it's off. You want it on. So while it's hovering over on, you just press enter to turn it on. So make sure plot 1 is turned on. And then under type, I'll arrow down in a minute. These are the different graphs your calculator can make. So you can make just a scatter plot, you can make a line graph. The third one is a histogram. The fourth and the fifth one are both box and whisker plots. I believe the difference between these is this first one would show you if you have an outlier. The next one either doesn't or doesn't look for outliers or something like that. I think that's the difference between the two. I usually use the first one if we're doing a box and whisker plot. And then this last one, I'm not sure if that does a different curve versus a line graph. I don't know if I've ever used that last one. So we want a histogram. So right now, the third one, the histogram should be highlighted. If it's not, you just have to arrow down and go over to it and press enter to highlight it. So you should have a histogram. And then you should also have where it says X list, you should have the name of the list you put your data into. So I put mine into L1 and mine says L1. So does yours say L1 right now, Lindsay? Okay, so you need to get it to say L2. So if you arrow down to it, and then to get L2 there, above your 2 key, you should see L2. So if you hit second and then 2, it should change to L2. Okay. Anybody else not have their list name there? It's something different. Okay. And then frequency, you don't have to put anything. You don't have the color on yours. So from here, why? Well, then you have to buy a color edition graphing calculator. From here, there were issues getting to the next screen. So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you go back to the home screen. Anytime you're anywhere on a graphing calculator and you want to go back to home, you just have to hit second and then mode, which is right next to it. Notice above mode it says quit. So second mode just brings you back to the home screen. It doesn't delete anything that you just did. It just brings you back to the home screen. And then from here, there's one thing I want you to check. You don't have to write this down. I want you to just hit y equals. So don't hit second, just y equals so you get this screen. And your screen should look like mine, meaning plot 1 should be bolded at the top. Plot 2 and plot 3 should not be. And then nothing should be typed in anywhere. Does anybody have something that looks different? Okay. You have numbers in there?
Yeah, I have 7 and 8.
Okay, then just clear those. So just put the cursor over them and hit clear for both. Okay, then from here, your calculator screen when you're graphing is called a viewing window or a graphing window. And there's an easy way to get graphing windows for statistics graphs. I'm going to write down the next 2 things we're going to press here. We're going to go to Zoom and then option 9, which is Zoom stat. And then I'll show you how to get there. So Zoom, there are 5 keys at the very top again. Zoom is the third one. So that's your Zoom key. Just hit Zoom. And then you might have to arrow down, but like you can see on my screen, number 9 says Zoom stat. That's what you want. So you can either from here just hit number 9, or you can arrow down to number 9 and click enter. But you can just from here, like 9, and then you should get a histogram. That looks like this, hopefully. Otherwise, something was typed in wrong. Anybody not get that? Okay. From here, once you have a histogram, then you would look at that histogram and picture if you drew a curve over it, what the distribution would be, if it's symmetric or skewed. Now, this one I do want to talk about more with you because I realize, well, I'll just say this. This is actually considered symmetric. I know it doesn't look like it. It looks like it should be skewed, but here's why it's being considered symmetric. Kind of compare these. The highest part of the histogram is in the middle. And then while your bars on either side are not necessarily the same height, if you drew a curve over it, both ends of the curve would be the same length. You don't have your highest part either to the right or to the left of the curve, and then you have a tail on one end. So your highest part is in the middle, and then your two ends of your curve would be the same length. That is why it's symmetric. So this is actually a symmetric distribution, or we would describe this as symmetric. So I'm going to go back here. So anytime you're asked to describe the shape of a distribution, you're just saying whether it's symmetric or positively or negatively skewed. So I'll just put here the distribution is symmetric. And now knowing that, I have to think about what statistics I'm going to use to describe the center and the spread. So in part B, it says describe center and spread using either the mean and standard deviation or the 5-number summary and justify your choice. So if you look back at the front, if our distribution is symmetric, what should we use? Yes, mean and standard deviation, because if it's symmetric, your mean is roughly in the middle. So it's a good measure, and then standard deviation goes with the mean. So I'll put here, since the distribution is symmetric, the mean and standard deviation are used. And then we need to find them, but we don't have to find them by hand like we did yesterday. The calculator can calculate that for you very quickly. So if you did the assignment from last night, I know I had heard from people that did the variance and the standard deviation on the second problem was that it just took forever because there were 12 values. And for each one, you have to subtract the mean and square it and then add them all together and divide by 12 or divide by 11. So this would take even longer because there's 24 values. It would take a while. The calculator can find all of the statistics that you need kind of in one shot. And I'll show you how to get that. So what you want to do is we're going to hit the stat key again. And you should be able to just hit that from this screen. You shouldn't have to go back to the home screen, just hit stat. And then notice at the top of the screen, there are 3 kind of menus. We're under the edit menu, but there's a calc menu and a tests menu. We want the calc menu. So you have to arrow to the right once to get to the calc menu. Just hit the right arrow. And then we want option 1, that is 1 var stats. That stands for 1 variable statistics. So from here now, depending on which calculator you grabbed, you're going to get a different screen. So you hit enter. If you have a yellow cover, you'll probably have a screen like I have. If you have a black cover, you just have the 1 var stats with your cursor blinking. So if you have this screen, you just want to make sure the list that's there, again, is the list you put your data into. So mine's L1. Lindsay, yours should say L2. Okay. And then frequency list, you don't put anything. You just go down to calculate and hit enter. And then, yes, if you have a black cover, you just hit enter. And it should give you this screen. If it doesn't, let me know. But nobody said anything first or fourth hour. Okay, anybody else not get this screen? Okay. Or anybody have different numbers? If you have different numbers, you may have like forgotten a value or typed something into your list wrong. But so these, well, I'll say this. This is not on your homework quiz for tomorrow, but on your quiz and your chapter test for this unit, there is part of your test that I do have you use graphing calculators for. We use them more than just today and tomorrow. We use them later on also. We're doing different things with graphing calculators. So there is a graphing calculator part of your test. But on your quiz and then on your test, I may include screenshots like this screen and ask you to pick out the values that I'm looking for. Like looking at the screen, what's the mean of the data? What's the standard deviation? Or what's the median, whatever it might be. And you have to be able to pick out from this list of numbers, and it does go down if you arrow down. You have to be able to pick out the numbers I'm asking for. So these are the symbols that we talked about yesterday, and you need to know them because your calculator shows these also. So if we just go through these, very first number, the x with the line above it, x bar, what did we say yesterday that represented? That's the mean. So x bar 53.5, that is the mean of those 24 values. And that's one of the values we want. We want the mean and standard deviation. So our mean x bar is 53.5. And then we need to find the standard deviation, but I'm also going to show you what the rest of the values represent. So these next two, the second and third, you won't have to worry about. The second one, all that is, it's the sum of all of the values. If you added all 24 together, you get 1284. The third one is if you squared all the values and added them together, that's what you get. So we don't need those for our purposes. The next two, so the x is just representing a variable. But what did we say yesterday? S, and then this is sigma, looks like an O, but it's the Greek S. What do both of those represent? Yes, those are standard deviation. One is for a sample, one is for a population. So you all need to know that. So since we need the standard deviation, notice the numbers are different. They're close, but they are different. So you need to know which one to give right now. You have to determine, do you have a sample or do you have a population, and then which one is which. So if I go back up here, because the problem isn't necessarily going to tell you what you have, it says the students in Mr. Fiji's language arts class. So would that be describing a sample or a population? What do you think? Yes, population, because it's the whole class. If it said 10 of his students in his language arts class gave their data, that's a sample because it's implying there are more than 10 students and only 10 of them gave their data. So this is a population. It's implied that that's all of his students in that class. So therefore, we want the population standard deviation. So now, between S and sigma, which one is the population standard deviation? Somebody said it. The second one, yep, sigma, the one that looks like an O. S is if you have a sample. The sample standard deviation is always slightly higher because remember you're dividing by n minus 1, you're dividing by a smaller number. So our standard deviation is sigma, and that is about 10.5. I'll round it to 10.5. Okay, and then I am going to write down kind of more of an interpretation of this, but I just want to quick go through the rest of these values also. So then what the rest of these mean, n is the number of data values that you have. So there's 24 values we typed in. And then if you arrow down, the last 5 numbers, that's your 5-number summary. You have your min, your quartile 1, your median, quartile 3, and your max. So if we needed, say this distribution was skewed and we needed the 5-number summary instead, then we would write down those 5 numbers instead of the mean and the standard deviation. And we would interpret that. So to interpret this, the mean would then be the average number of minutes spent on homework each night. So I'm going to say on average, because you need to be able to interpret numbers. That's a huge part of statistics, is what do the numbers mean. So on average, the students spent 53.5 minutes on homework each night. And then the standard deviation. So this one I know is always a little weird to explain, but again, what it is, it's on average how far away from the mean the data values are. So I'm going to, I'll explain this as on average, I'll put study, well, I shouldn't say study, time spent on homework. On average, time spent on homework differed from the mean by 10.5 minutes. So that's the meaning of the standard deviation. It's an average of how far away the values are from the mean. So in this case, the average time differed by each individual student from the mean. All those differences and then averaged together. All right, questions? So the calculator, I know that's the part that takes the longest, teaching you guys how to do that.